to the Ant. Yes, there was a name change. Really, it's just a shortening of the Antartographer. I think it's going to be easier for people to interact with the podcast with this name, so that's the reason for the name change. Anyway, I have a good episode for you here today. On this episode, I had an in-depth discussion with a local South Florida organizer, activist that is in many different activist scenes. I reached out wanting to know more about these pamphlets or zines that they've been putting together about big weapons manufacturers that are located all around Florida. Now, we go deep on that, as well as other organizations they're involved in, like Food Not Bombs, Shutdown, Alligator Alcatraz, and more. Now, I think that most of the listeners out there who will hear this are probably like-minded thinkers, but some others might feel a little uncomfortable by the topics that we discussed. And what I'd say to those people is that we live in uncomfortable times for many people. The long-standing war against the poor, against immigrants, against people in the global south, against the working class, is only getting deadlier by the day. So when we talk about putting pressure on weapons manufacturers or supporting political prisoners, it's within that context. Companies that produce weapons of war are complicit in war crimes. It's that simple, at least to my logic. To say something else, political prisoners exist within the United States, despite what some may have you believe. Something that is just other countries, places like Russia or North Korea, that do political repression and lock away dissidents. But no, this country does so too. My guest brought up a few of these cases of political prisoners. Two names, Casey Gunan and Elias Rodriguez. Now, in the show notes, I linked a whole bunch of articles for context, and also one of the articles has the mailing address for these two individuals. If you so choose to contact them, I'm not saying you should, I'm not saying you shouldn't, but I do think that political prisoners and standing up for what's right is just. Maybe the law doesn't say so in a lot of cases, but that's because the law is written to protect the powerful in this country, and we talk about that all the time on this podcast. So the sources are there, and there's plenty of other ones, I'm sure. So yeah, I just wanted to say those things before we get into the conversation. And so before I pass it off, please follow my guest and look into their work on Instagram and the link trees provided in the notes, in the show notes. And follow the show, follow the Ant. Thanks for listening and enjoy the conversation.
Do I call you Ant?
Yeah, you could call me the Ant, yeah.
Okay.
So, thanks again for doing this. I'm here with Possum, and we've connected online. And, I started following you from a certain organization, so you think you could briefly just introduce yourself to whoever's listening out there?
Sure, yeah. So, I'm Possum. I'm with the Disarm Florida Alliance, which aims to be an encyclopedic body of work. Shedding light on the locations of major weapons manufacturers, their investors, the logistics contractors in Florida. We're publishing our work on our own website at Linktree Disarm FL, as well as the Solidarity South Florida page has been publishing our work as well on the social medias.
where do you want to start with this? Because is this sort of like a campaign? I know you're saying it's a resource to see all of the locations. I mean, I've looked at the zines, and they're very comprehensive, like some people have said in the comments, and
Mm-hmm.
and it's valuable information. Like, this is stuff I did not know. You know, I assumed that there were certain companies because I've taken trips near Cape Canaveral, and I've seen, Space Force and different company names on certain buildings that make you wonder, like, what is the extent to which, not just the government but weapon manufacturers are here around us, and
Mm-hmm.
you lay it out in these pamphlets and zines.
Yeah, sure. So the Disarm Florida Alliance, it came out of the campaign to shut down Elbit in Boca Raton. Um, and that campaign started shortly after October 7th, 2023. And we were protesting that location as well as the homes of the employees for about a year. We picketed the business, protested where they were at their homes, like at inconvenient times and holidays when we knew they'd be home.
Yeah.
We're flying all over South Florida, bringing awareness to the fact that Israeli weapons manufacturer is right here in our backyard making tank parts, and we couldn't keep it up. South Florida is a tough place to organize, and I think everyone organizing around Palestine is frustrated down here about how hard it is to maintain momentum. But the campaign it's all there. The research is all there. The experience of how to do it is all there. It could come back at any time. But
yeah.
So I guess that's really the history of it, of us. I'm also an organizer at Food Not Bombs Fort Lauderdale, and so we're around for sure. We organize, but the Disarm Florida Alliance was how we map these locations, not just Elbit, because they have 2 locations in Florida, one way up north of Ocala and one down here. But there are dozens of major weapons manufacturers, and they have locations in pretty much every major city in Florida. We shouldn't think about there just being like 1 or 2 here in Florida. No.
Yeah.
Florida's a major hotbed of weapons manufacturers. And so Disarm Florida really has like 2 goals. There's the primary goal, which is to thoroughly research every weapons manufacturer that is in Florida and that has 10,000 employees or more worldwide. That's what we've decided to consider major. As well as, like I said, their contractors, their subsidiaries, investors, logistics companies that work with them, to really map out the big players. And then once we've researched all of those companies, and we've been releasing them company by company. First we did Lockheed, then Raytheon, then General Dynamics. But once we get through all the companies, we will then bind all of the zines into a book, along with history of how these companies have operated here in Florida, analysis of their supply chains, relationships to politicians and local governments, and a whole lot more. We've got a lot of big plans for this book. And then we're going to sell that book and donate whatever proceeds that come from that directly to folks being bombed by the U.S. empire, including those in Palestine, Sudan, Congo, Rojava, and Venezuela. That's the primary long-term goal. It's a big goal. We've got a lot of work to do, but it's the primary goal because mutual aid across borders, it saves lives, and we need vehicles like this book to organize our community towards big mutual aid projects. And then we have the secondary goal, which is to shape the anti-imperialism, anti-war movement. Parallel to publishing the book, we'll also mail out zines that are very local to the geographic locations that we're sending them to organizations like Food Not Bombs. So that way, anyone that comes to their table then can pick up a zine say, oh, these are all the weapons manufacturers in my county or within an hour driving time. They're really concentrated in South Florida, Space Coast, Orlando, Tampa, Jacksonville, and the Panhandle. So that's sort of what we're thinking is a zine for each of those general areas.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so of course, this will help advertise for the book and bring in people who are interested in buying the book and supporting people in these countries that are being bombed. But we're also hoping to make a point that there are weapons manufacturers that you can protest all over Florida. There should be local movements against them in every city, pressuring these factories of death to shut down. We are most powerful when we organize locally, but also everywhere all at once. And there isn't a huge anti-war movement in Florida, but it is there for sure. And it's frustrating that they're so fixated on symbolic rallies that are, downtown and city centers when all of these weapons manufacturers are right there. So yeah, those are our primary two goals, our primary and our secondary goal.
No, that makes a lot of sense. The goals and the project is amazing, and I'll support it. I mean, and so can we go a little into like the individual ones? So, for instance, just to give some details, because I read the Lockheed Martin one, the Raytheon one, the General Dynamics one. So Lockheed Martin has 17 different locations scattered around Florida, which is second to Texas. And then just like Raytheon and just like General Dynamics has many, many partnerships with colleges and universities, right?
Yeah.
Some that a lot of, maybe potential listeners or even me, I went to, just so you know, I might edit it out, but and they have partnerships with these companies,
Yeah, of course.
So in researching this and maybe knowing this already but putting it together and being relearning it, what are some things that really, what type of value do you think this research provides for your everyday citizen that are around these areas?
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, these weapons manufacturers thrive in secrecy. You don't, like the Elbit location in Boca Raton, it's right next to a children's gymnastics gym. Like this building's full of explosives. It is a real hazard to the area, and there are kids, around all the time. And so I think that really, things like that, it really speaks to people who may not care about these places that are being bombed. Like Boca Raton's a very Zionist place. Many of those parents of those children are Zionists. And when they realize that, that door over there, it has a warning explosive, sticker on the door, like, they may not care about Palestinians. They may be genocidal maniacs themselves, but they don't want to get blown up. And, that's such an extreme example. Of course, it applies to anyone that's around these places.
Yeah.
And then another big caveat here is that the United Auto Workers Union unionizes many of these locations. Because
it's like engineering jobs or something like that.
Right. And I mean, airplanes, Ford and GM, they built a lot of airplanes during World War II. So it's all the same history for the union.
Yeah.
If you're a UAW member, you should be giving your union hell about, the fact that you guys are, invested, and part of your membership and part of your strike fund is being built up by people who are committing war crimes by building bombs that they know will go to slaughter civilians and support the U.S. empire. And I mean, it keeps going. The connections that these companies have, they are they're so powerful. They are so intrinsic to the ruling class's vision for what this country should be that, I mean, there are banks that are deeply invested in them. There's accounting firms. There's Maersk shipping, which we see, the trucks driving with the shipping containers on the road all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like that shipping container you're driving by could be explosive hazard. That driver hits one wrong bump and boom.
Yeah.
So it's a very real threat, and it's one that is. I mean, of course, we should all be anti-imperialist. Unfortunately, most of America is not. We are the core of the empire, and most people are very pleased about that fact. Certainly, both political parties are.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, when you see anything at all connected to these manufacturers of death, you should understand that they're killing civilians and that they are not good for our communities either. The money that's going to them could be funding healthcare, could be funding schools, be funding all sorts of things that are beneficial to the American working class, as well as not slaughtering the international working class, especially in the global south. So yeah, I think that really is the connection to a broader everyday citizen. But for those who are, interested in doing something about it, stop going to these symbolic rallies. Demand that your local protest, your local activist scene takes these weapons manufacturers seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Here in South Florida, we have the Torch of Friendship. It has a long and wild history of political activism that goes all the way back to JFK. But pretty much every movement that focuses on protesting there has very little impact because that's a free speech zone. Just as any other city center or government sector is in any major city, the cops are ready to contain you. They've, been to 1 million protests there. They know how to control people there. The Bayside Mall's right there, but, the cops are going to make sure you don't get to Bayside. They're going to make sure you're just standing on a sidewalk. And yet, organizers, they just keep returning to these sites because the goal is good optics rather than actually accomplishing something tangible. And optics, they shouldn't be the priority. I guess let me put it that way. Accomplishing something tangible for the people who are being bombed, as well as our own communities, that should be our priority. A lot of folks are upset that Trump bombed Venezuela. A lot of folks were upset that Zionists bombed Gaza into rubble. But when this energy makes no tangible impacts, the empire wins. The empire makes sure that our so-called free speech is nominal at best, because the true test of free speech is whether or not that speech leads to change. It doesn't, and it never will, inside an empire built on violence, when all you're doing is focusing on good optics. We got to focus on tangible impact. Throwing a monkey wrench into the military-industrial complex's machine.
No, and I tend to agree with you. I mean, and I know I've felt, similarly. I haven't been in this world as long as you, and a lot of people have put in a lot of good work, and I, sometimes I think like, well, I hope that a lot of these organizations that are posting the same things and thinking the same things are coordinating the same things, same actions, same towards the same goals. And these are tangible, what you're saying. I mean, because you don't even have to eliminate the optics. The optics are there. This is very explicit and also dangerous protesting or public disobedience that is necessary and has always been necessary in history to change anything, and if very few people are willing to do it, then that shows a lot about myself. It shows a lot about this this community, this place that we live in, and we need more people. We do need more people. And the zines, I'm sure, will help the growth of this, Disarm, and I hope that this recording helps. Um, just so you know, I don't have many listeners, you know. It has been my, you know, little project, and a lot of people have, you know, helped me and talked to me on this program before. And like I said, thank you again for talking with me.
Thank you.
But because I think these stories are very important. Like there's a lot of Alligator Alcatraz for one thing. I'm sure you know a lot about it. You know,
Sure.
that's another thing that South Floridians need to be focusing on. That in Miami-Dade, supposedly they're gonna try to build a massive trash compactor that's gonna pollute the air and the ground soil and all this type of stuff. From all angles, there's certain things that we need to be focusing on and we're not.
Yeah.
So what can you say about Alligator Alcatraz? Because that's something that I wanted to talk about here.
Sure. So I think that the model that we developed to pressure Elbit into leaving Boca Raton, it's an applicable model for a lot of different, movement spaces, a lot of different entities. Alligator Alcatraz is being built by contractors, and those contractors have locations all across South Florida. I know that the one company, the Empire Tents or something, they have a location in Sweetwater. And so if we can apply this model of picketing the location of the business, protesting the homes of the employees, and pressuring their business partners to cut ties with them, we can start to starve Alligator Alcatraz or the trash incinerator, or your local prison or other immigration detention facilities, the jails. All of them have contractors. All of them need those contractors to operate. All of them have employees. All of those employees need to show up to work in order to operate. And, at the beginning of Shutdown Elbit, someone said to me, it's a great idea that we should do this, but let's be real, we're not going to shut them down. They're very powerful. And I think that's so pessimistic because, first of all, we all know how to shut down a building. It just takes one brave person with a match, and who's willing to sacrifice a whole lot. It is possible to do these things. It just, if you do it with no organization, it can require enormous sacrifice. We didn't have enormous sacrifice with Elbit. We were an organization. We had, a couple misdemeanor arrests. The charges were dropped. But certainly no one went to prison for years. So that's what we need organizers to be thinking about. If we aren't going to sacrifice something as extreme as like Elias Rodriguez or Casey Gunan, who both Casey got 19 years in prison and Elias was probably going to get life in prison. If we aren't going to make that kind of sacrifice, and like I understand why, of course, there are still a lot of ways to proceed and making tangible impacts. It requires organization, it requires dedication over time. But yeah, I spent 6 months in federal prison for direct action against a fascist organization. They're a pro-life organization in Miami that was against the right to have abortions. So I absolutely know what sacrifice for the movement is, and I saw in prison how much worse it could be. But you don't necessarily need to do that. You showed up to one of our pickets at Elbit. It didn't really look that much different than one of these protests at the Torch of Friendship. We were on the sidewalk. We were peaceful. We weren't taking any shit from the cops or the Zionists, but, it wasn't like we were in the trenches there. But by being there, by protesting the employees themselves, that had some direct impact. We don't know what the impact was, but we know it wasn't negligible. Even if an employee thinks about quitting, either for moral reasons or just because they don't like to be insulted on their way into work, that's a loss of productivity for the military-industrial complex. Every little bit of loss of productivity is a victory. So This is Disarm Florida's charge to the anti-imperialist movement. Stop thinking about optics. Start thinking about how you can have a direct impact on the empire, even if it's not going to come with a ton of sacrifice, even if you're not going to have an enormous impact. Do it at the local level with your community standing next to you, because there's likely a weapons manufacturer in your backyard. And for those who are willing to sacrifice, they certainly exist. I'm not necessarily suggesting that anyone should do something that would require sacrifice, but I know that there will always be people out there who are going to take that upon themselves. And so the direct action that I took part in, it was a one-off thing. We did not have a campaign built up around it. It was a one-off thing that was more out of frustration than anything.
Mm-hmm.
And it caused a very minor amount of disruption for this organization. We graffitied their wall, and they painted over it within a day. And now the fascist organization, they're stronger than ever. They continue to operate. Mm-hmm. But by contrast, in Boston, where there was a Shutdown Elbit campaign, some people graffitied the wall and smashed a window, and it was a small part of a much bigger campaign, and therefore it was way, way, way more effective. It made both the direct action more effective and the rest of the campaign more effective. And similar statements can be said about the direct actions taken against Cop City in Atlanta. Lashing out at random, it really only works if someone goes to the absolute extreme and sacrifices a lot. And then even then, not really. Look at Luigi. He changed how this country thinks about how insurance companies operate, but those companies, they continue to operate. Mm-hmm. It's not like, his extreme action actually caused these companies to disappear from our society. But targeted, smart, direct action that complements a broader pressure campaign against reprehensible actors like the military-industrial complex, like Alligator Alcatraz, like the trash incinerator that's going to destroy the Everglades. That makes them much more effective. And Elbit actually shut down its location in Boston. That was a Shutdown Elbit campaign that succeeded, and Elbit lost millions of dollars in investment in the process, not to mention lost productivity of moving employees and rebuilding factories. And they actually recently shut down another facility thanks to a Shutdown Elbit campaign in North Carolina. So we know that these tactics work, and that's what we got to focus on. Every little bit of lost productivity for this empire. But yeah, the other thing that pressure campaigns do is that if someone does decide to do something extreme, they build up support for that person should they get caught. I really, really encourage folks to write to political prisoners, to support their commissary, and to organize for their release. Casey Gunan has a ton of support, but Elias Rodriguez does not, and he could use a friend. It is imperative to our movement that we support those who have been taken from us by the prison industrial complex.
Can you speak a little bit as to Elias Gonzalez, who he is, or who they are?
Yeah, Elias Rodriguez, he assassinated 2 Israeli diplomats in Washington, D.C., I want to say in June. And then Casey Gunan, during the encampment protests in California, set a police squad car on fire. Elias is facing terrorism charges, and he admitted to it. He didn't even try and run away. So he will likely be convicted. Just will depend on what charge he ultimately is convicted on. And then Casey took a plea deal and just began their 19-year in prison sentence, which is a draconian sentence. It's far out of line for property damage, but
for sure.
The state is very upset that anyone would do that for the cause of Palestine.
And it's a scare tactic. All these years and harsh sentences or a scare tactic too.
Yep.
You know, you hear, oh, even setting a car on fire is, what'd you say, 16 years?
19.
19 years is, you know, is it, I mean, you know, you think about it for 1 second, and it obviously it means that the state values a cop car more than a human life, because you're putting
Right.
a life away for 19 years for damaging a thing, not a living thing, a thing. And you know, the news media doesn't do any of these stories justice, because if we had a good media, you know, the public would understand this sort of, you know, dichotomy or this hypocrisy, you know. But they don't, and they leave these types of stories up to randoms on the internet, you know. So I wanted to ask you about the FBI. There are a lot of things that I wanted to ask you about, but you mentioned, so on the topic of like healthy criticism, I think very healthy criticism towards organizations. As an example, like the DSA, like to chase optics in their protest methods. Am I following you correctly? And if so,
Yeah.
like, what has been your relationship with these organizations, and your share of tactics and conversations with organizations like that, and all that?
Yeah, I mean, organizations, I'm more of a believer in personal relationships. Of course, we need the organizations, but at the end of the day, I know these people on an individual level. And I think because of that, and because of other ways that we've built power, like Broward DSA, they were showing up to the Shutdown Elbit. It's not even in Broward County, but they were making the drive. Palm Beach DSA was not so much. A few were, but not so much. And Miami DSA was not interested at all, and has continued to not be interested in the weapons manufacturers in Miami. And you know, the DSAs, they are what they are, but they're certainly not the nonprofits. You know, there are very, very well-funded, well-paid organizers here in South Florida, like the Jewish Voice for Peace, or the El Auda Right to Return Coalition, that have no interest whatsoever in this. They want to make sure that their donors are getting what they're paying for. And the donors, they want to see good optics. They want to see press headlines. They don't want to see, you know, potentially, you know, an employee complaining that he can't get to his job making bombs because he'll be insulted. And so the nonprofits are especially toxic to tangible impacts, in my experience. And so that's not necessarily a South Florida thing. I don't know if you've ever read, you know, the nonprofit Industrial Complex zine. I absolutely recommend that.
No, I haven't.
For you and for our listeners. But yeah, and then you see on the flip side the successes that the Shutdown Elbit campaign has had elsewhere, primarily in Britain, where there is a very different type of police state than we have here, and whatever success they're having has to be understood that their police is just much smaller and much less armed. But on the other hand, you know, there's the hunger strike going on right now. Yeah. People are facing terrorism charges for something that cannot possibly be considered terrorism, and they're going on hunger strike as a form of protest of these charges and of the continuing genocide of Palestinians, risking their own lives. I think one person's on 71 days now of not eating anything.
Wow.
And then, you know, there's I mentioned Boston and North Carolina as well, where both of those locations have shut down. I believe that a Raytheon was recently shut down somewhere out west in California. But yeah, so it's these grassroots movements where people come together to accomplish a goal rather than to look good, rather than to build up a political party or to satisfy a donor base. Here in South Florida, we do not have strong grassroots organizations. And therefore, our campaign has fizzled out. Like I said, it's ready to be reignited. But for now, we just have to acknowledge that we don't have the power to be effective. You mentioned, the FBI I was telling you about.
Yeah.
The FBI knocked on one of the Shutdown Elbit organizers' door. It was just a pure scare tactic. They wanted to ask questions if, threats of violence were being made against weapons manufacturers. They had no evidence. Everything that the Disarm Florida Alliance is doing and everything that Shutdown Elbit was doing was entirely based on public information. It's not like, we're sneaking into these facilities and leaving threats on the walls. It's an easy Google search. Actually, please use DuckDuckGo, not Google. But it's public information. But the FBI was there just to intimidate. And with how small the grassroots movement is here in South Florida, it's much easier to identify individuals. It's much easier to identify relationships when there aren't tens of thousands of people doing this. And so that is what we have to just acknowledge here in South Florida. We don't have the power to be effective. So what we are really looking to do is build up power. And we're doing that very much by keeping a hard line against counter-revolutionary entities. For example, 50501, they're funded by Walmart. They're funded by the billionaire class. And the billionaire class is doing that because they want to drain our community's energy on these big symbolic protests.
Is that related to No Kings?
Yeah, exactly. And don't get me wrong, it's incredible that, thousands of people are coming out, but why are thousands of people coming out for that where there aren't even clear demands, let alone a tangible impact? And then, we're struggling to get 50 people to come out to Elbit. And then, we got to keep a hard line against the police state. We have to care for one another to prevent burnout. But more than anything, we have to build power. We have to put an alternative system in place outside of government, outside of capitalism, that takes care of our community and educates our community and makes us capable of doing things like shutting down a weapons manufacturer. So, like I said, I'm a member of Food Not Bombs. We think about how every organizer has two goals, one to tear down the old world and the other to build a new one. But that does not mean that those two goals are necessarily equal. And obviously, at different periods in history, one goal is more important than the other. Realistically, here in South Florida, we should be building a whole lot more than we're trying to tear down the old world. So, Shutdown Elbit, South Florida, we were at the Food Not Bomb food shares, organizing the protests at Elbit while giving away food. So I recommend that folks focus a lot of their time and energy on mutual aid, on community defense, on education, so that when there are moments of a lot of energy around them, such as June in 2020 after George Floyd was murdered, or October 7th in 2023, you can then take that power, that infrastructure that you've built, and just simply apply it to tearing down the old world. And most importantly, the old world is collapsing, between climate change, between, war, between capitalism just becoming more and more corrupt every day, and the people just not getting their needs met. Like the old world's coming down regardless if we help it along or not. And so we have to be ready to usher in a new world as it's collapsing. We have to be ready to capture all of that energy, all of that power, and put it into a grassroots system. And once you build that infrastructure, you can apply it to weapons manufacturers just as easily as you can apply it to Alligator Alcatraz or to the trash incinerator,
So, for Food Not Bombs, for anybody who's listening that doesn't understand what you guys do and how it works and, how they can help, what's it about?
Yeah, so Food Not Bombs, it came out of the anti-Vietnam War movement, and the idea is that it's a decentralized, non-hierarchical entity that exists all over the world, and the mission is to abolish war, incarceration, and hunger. And so if you were trying to do one of those three things, especially by giving away food, like that is Food Not Bombs, and doing it in a very radical way, deeply rooted in leftist politics. It certainly is deeply related to anarchism and anarchist organizing, but not everyone in Food Not Bombs is an anarchist necessarily. So here in Fort Lauderdale, Food Not Bombs Fort Lauderdale shows up every Tuesday at 6:30. We give away hot food to unhoused folks, and as well as clothing, hygiene supplies, really anything you can think of that someone sleeping outside would need. We try and give it away. We're not a nonprofit. We are self-funded. A lot of the food comes from food that would otherwise be thrown away. So we have several farmers markets that gives us their produce that's going to spoil before they can sell it. And, we take it and we cook it that night. In order to divert it from the waste stream. We've got a couple restaurants that do the same idea for us. And we're exploring the possibility of delivering groceries all across the county. We think that will really help build a Skillshare network, people that can help each other out with the things that they're already good at, as well as teach folks. Food Not Bombs Miami just did a great Skillshare event where they hand-stitched pillows. One of the members just, a very talented sewer, and is like, hey, let's all learn this skill. And that's great. That how can you use your skills and your power to increase the power of your community? That is everything. We also think that delivering groceries is going to lay the foundations for a tenants union, where renters will be in touch with everyone else who rents from their landlord and can start to negotiate rent and other tenants' rights as a union rather than as individuals. We're revamping our Food Not Bars program outside the Broward County Jail in collaboration with our sibling organization, the Community Hotline for Incarcerated Persons, also known as CHIP, South Florida. We just had a jail rally outside of the jail, which we do every year in Broward County on New Year's Eve. Food Not Bars is where we set up a table outside of the jail and everyone getting out. We offer them rides, clothes, cigarettes, really anything that they might need or want to help them process and deal with the trauma of incarceration, as well as the shock of being released back into society. We fundraise at local punk shows and community events. We sell books, jewelry, clothing, keffiyehs, and more to send the proceeds to families in Sudan and Palestine. The Disarm Florida book will definitely be on sale at those events. But yeah, Food Not Bombs generally is a grassroots organization centered around giving away food and organizing in an anti-capitalist manner, not being a nonprofit. And we're really lucky here in South Florida. We've got 4 chapters, 2 in Miami, 1 in Homestead, 1 in Miami, 1 here in Fort Lauderdale, and 1 in West Palm Beach. And the Fort Lauderdale, I think, is approaching 26 years now. I know West Palm Beach is approaching 20 years. The Miami chapter has been off and on over the years. I'm really not sure how old it is, but it's had downtimes as well. And the Homestead chapter is brand new. You can find all of these chapters on Instagram. I know that the Solidarity South Florida folks, they have like a story highlight with all of the information about them. But yeah, even beyond food not bombs, like there are many ways to build power. Write a prisoner and see how you can help meet their needs. That is one of the best ways. The people inside these dungeons, they are the tip of the spear of organizing in America, and they need our support. You can start a community garden. You can start a cop watch chat with your neighbors. Every time a cop comes by, you text the group chat. Really anything that brings people together for a common political purpose and lays the foundation for a system that provides care instead of war, incarceration, and poverty, and does it without relying on capitalism or government. That's where we got to be thinking. Stop sinking your energies into strategies that do nothing but look good. Build power for a foundation for a new world. Get creative how to tear down the old, even if that just means you're picketing a weapons manufacturer instead of being corralled in a free speech zone. Yeah.
I've seen I've seen some cross promotion or whatever between you and the Boca Raton City Hall anti-Israel bonds group, which I've been to a few of their and I've covered them. I actually interviewed one of them yesterday. And what are your connections with that group and like the communication's been with them? Because it's very small, it's very small. I just for context, I live in between Boca Raton and Miramar, so near Miramar there's not a big organizing community necessarily. I see a lot of organizing in Miami, but that's a little ways away, but it's doable. I guess advice for me, since you know all this stuff. I want to go and help you guys at Food Not Bombs Fort Lauderdale, for instance. This Tuesday, if work permits, I'll go over there and help out. So like, what would I have to? Well, not have to bring, but I have some clothes for sure that I can donate. I can get a few things, food. But what type of food can people donate? What type of clothes? Those types of details.
Yep. Yeah. So let me first start with the protesters up in Boca. I know that the folks at Solidarity South Florida, they really try and promote anything and everything that is organizing outside of government and capitalism. And so, unfortunately, that is rarer than you might think. A lot of organizations down here make sure that they speak to the police before they organize a protest.
Yeah.
And thankfully, the protesters up in Boca, they do not do that. They hold a very hard line against organizations that do that. And so I know that the Solidarity folks, there may be more effective ways to protest than at the City Hall, but, there's no harm being done,
Yeah.
And there's certainly awareness being raised. There's certainly people coming into this that have not been organizers before or that have just haven't been able to connect here locally in South Florida. So we're all hoping that can be another source of building power, and that power can be applied to many different things in Boca Raton. There's Elbit in Boca. There's Geo Group. There's an airlines that's, I forget what they're called now, that's been providing flights for ICE, deportation flights.
Wow.
Boca is, it's a very concentrated location for some of the most evil companies in this empire. And so, it's great to see. And then as far as Miramar, have you heard of the Circle of Protection folks at the Miramar Ice Facility every Wednesday morning?
No, I haven't.
I would have to find their details, but I know that they've been doing that for a long time. They ice forces folks to come and check in when they have certain types of visas, and be interviewed on a pretty regular basis. And ICE makes them stand in a long line out in the sun, and then when they go in, their kids can't go with them, and ICE has been deporting people from these types of interviews. So sometimes, the parent goes in and they don't come back out. Yeah. And now the kids are just there alone. And so some organizers, they've been doing it, I want to say since at least 2016, maybe even earlier than that. But it's, I want to say 6 or 7 a.m. Wednesday morning at the Miramar Ice Facility. And so, yeah, I think that's a great way to build power. That's great mutual aid. That's a great way to connect with community, and that type of infrastructure. I mean, they were integral into the lockdowns of Geo Group up in Boca 5-6 years ago now. That infrastructure can be applied to tearing down the old world while doing harm reduction and building power in the meantime. As far as Food Not Bombs, we really take everything. What we really do ask, though, is that people do not spend money buying meat or dairy products. We do not want money flowing to the animal industrial complex. And we also ask to please respect the boycott, divest, sanction movement. So, Coca-Cola, definitely not. That list is easily available. But on the other hand, we are proudly free. And by that, I mean, if you're not spending money, if you're diverting these products out of the waste stream, if, they're going missing at grocery stores, and you're not paying for certain products, that is wonderful. We absolutely support that. Obviously meat and dairy can spoil very easily, so please be safe with it. But yeah, clothes for sure. We're always lacking enough men's clothes, and hygiene products, reading materials. We do okay with that, but we are always looking for more. Okay. Walkers, accessibility devices, COVID masks. I mean, if you have a skill that like there's a guy that comes every week. He's actually unhoused himself, but he brings a razor and he gives free haircuts to folks at the Food Not Bombs distribution. Nice. And so, if you have a skill and that's how you want to show up, that's great as well. But especially for your first time, don't feel any pressure. We sort of self-organize into pods, and the pods are organized around people who live together or near one another or just close friends, whatever it may be. And so it's way more productive to be working in a team of 3 to 5 people. One person sources the food, another person cooks, another person brings it to the sharing. Those relationships will form if you're showing up regularly. So for your first time, just show up, introduce yourself to the people by the tables, and ask how to help. And we'll most certainly be pleased to meet you. Once you've been to 2 sharings, then that's it. You're a member of the organization. We add you to the group chat, and hopefully by then you've started to form some personal relationships, and you're starting to see ways to either join a pod that works well for you, or maybe you're thinking about starting a new one because someone else is working all alone in your area, or maybe you can start speaking to your family members or your friends about, hey, I do this. You want to cook for this, and I'll take it. And yeah. That's how we get really productive, is forming those pods. But at the beginning, no stress. Just show up and
No, it makes sense. I like that organization. I'm gonna look into the Miramar one, like you said. So, what would you like to, if anything, towards the end of this podcast, like to talk about? And maybe you have questions for me, or maybe you want to say more about the campaign. I'm interested in all of it. So.
Okay. Here, let me pull up a list of all of the weapons manufacturers. I want to say that there are nearly 30 in total. But so, if you want to help with the Disarm Florida Coalition or the Disarm Florida Alliance's project, we're really looking for researchers, graphic designers, and copy editors. There's an enormous amount of research. Every zine takes, maybe 100 hours to research, design, and edit. But yeah, so there's Elbit, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, General Dynamics. There's Rafael, which is another Israeli weapons manufacturer. There's Boeing, of course. L3 Harris is mostly located along the Space Coast. Leidos, I believe, Leidos and Thales are both, I believe, French weapons manufacturers. There's Embraer, which I believe is a British one. General Electric, which makes everything, including weapons and bombs. Safran and Airbus, I believe, are also French. Paraton, Rolls-Royce, the famous car manufacturer, they make fighter jet engines. So, I mean, it's a long list of weapons manufacturers. And then there's, their partners.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we definitely need help remotely. And then I would also definitely recommend checking out our link tree, which is linktree /Disarm Florida. You can find all of the published scenes, further reading, ways to get involved. Our email is there. That's the best way to get involved. But yeah, I think beyond that, definitely show up for mutual aid, figure out how to build power in your community. And when there are moments of high intensity, like right after Trump, kidnapping Maduro, think about, instead of going downtown to that free speech area, think about going to your local weapons manufacturer and how you can have tangible impacts. And yeah, absolutely talk about that as a strategy for other movements.
Yeah.
The Alligator Alcatraz movement is, they know, there was initially some interest in calling these contractors and flooding their phone lines, but that interest never materialized into protests or pickets or pressuring the employees rather than the business. And so, yeah, bring these strategies, bring these tactics to other movement spaces.
Do you feel like that's a big or the reason for that is that a lot of people are learning about these things, if they even learn about it, through online, mainly Instagram and TikTok and all these types of stuff, and it has sort of an inundation effect where a lot of people see a lot of different things, and by the end of it they don't decide on one thing. I'll be honest. I feel that a lot, because just, and I've never been an Instagram guy, but the last few years wanting to get into activism, that's the only way I knew how to figure out, where things were at, and and then you see how much is going on, and then all of a sudden you haven't picked a lane,
Right.
So do you feel like that, and the way that these socials are literally programmed to do a certain thing, you feel like that's a demotivating, de-energizing thing, and how do we counteract that? I mean, face to face, I know that's one at a time, one person at a time. I know that. That's the most important thing, I think. But
Yeah, so I mean, all of what you said, right? We're being overwhelmed with information constantly. What do you call, what's the content that's made by AI called? Like, it's not spam, it's AI junk or something.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it's getting worse. We're just constantly overwhelmed, and the algorithms are working against us. Also, these companies are sharing all of their data with law enforcement, so they're absolutely spying on every account that they want to. They don't even need a warrant; they'll just pay Instagram to give them the data. And so, yeah, I mean, you should really view the social media as propaganda warfare. Like, it's a tool. It's not the only tool, and it's probably not the best tool, but it's where a lot of people are in order to connect with them. You got to have it in some ways. I do encourage my friends and comrades to delete their personal and to work work with some sort of online political entity. Even doesn't really matter what it is. Like, even if you're using your org account to watch cat videos, like your name isn't attached to it. So they got to do a lot more work to figure out who you are.
And does sharing accounts also work? Like, 3 persons or 1 person to an account and stuff like that,
Right.
Like, so you're not using it for personal, it's like for your organization and stuff.
But I mean, so a lot of people, they're putting a lot of time and energy to speak out about Palestine on their personal stories on Instagram. And it's like, who's seeing that? Not a lot of people. I mean, yeah, you should be talking to, your people in your personal life about this, including folks that, maybe they are your family and have very different political views. But is Instagram the best way to do that? What if you put all of that social media time? I mean, it's labor, right? You could have a job to do this for certain companies. What if you put that labor into an organizing account instead? But yeah, what do we do about it? I think the main thing is we got to move off social media as much as we can. Like, use it as the tool that it is. Don't get me wrong, but like the zines, there's a reason we're focusing on in this day and age. Something that we're going to print and physically give to people. I think that has. I mean, in 2020, I was a burned out Bernie bro, very frustrated that Bernie had lost 2 primaries seemingly on purpose, had no real political education beyond that, and someone handed me a zine at a Black Lives Matter protest, and that's what made me an organizer. That's what set me on the road to stop just complaining about the politicians, which suck. They always suck. Here's how to do something in your community. Like, that was life-changing for me. And I read that zine, I passed it on, and you pass it on. This physical media stays in our communities. I think the best way, though, is absolutely to show up to a mutual aid organization. Like, Food Not Bombs, our on-the-ground stuff is giving away food and, selling stuff to fundraise, and maybe soon delivering groceries. But we can take that infrastructure and we can apply it to any number of things. And it's not necessarily like abolish war, incarceration, and hunger. That's a broad mission. On October 7th, the world's paying attention to Palestine for the first time in maybe ever. Well, let's harness that energy. Let's take our infrastructure, harness the energy that exists, and go protest Elbit. The world's paying attention to Alligator Alcatraz. All right, well, let's take our infrastructure, harness that energy, go protest this tent company in Sweetwater. So that can certainly help with the information overload, because now your infrastructure, your mutual aid group, it can be applied to any number of movements. Because if you've been in an organizer for long enough, you quickly see that the energy ebbs and tides. 2020, 2023, they were big high water moments in American organizing.
Mm-hmm.
And the time in between those times it's not a high water moment by any means. And so build when you can, so that when the energy is there, you don't need to, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You just take what you already have and apply it.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, I mean, at Food Not Bombs, we've got literature on the table about any number of topics. For about political education. We're, after the food share, we're shooting the shit about all sorts of politically important topics.
Nice.
So it's that, I think, also helps with the information overwhelming you. Because, it's tangible. You're talking to someone in person. It's not just a video where, it's like, all right, this sucks. Swipe up, next video. But no, it's, hey, I feel strongly about this thing. I don't know if we can do something about it, but let's talk about it, and maybe we can. That's key. That's everything. And that's what happens at mutual aid events like Circle of Protection, like Food Not Bombs. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, it sounds great. Well, there's a lot of things going on, and thank you for all that information. Food Not Bombs, for sure. Let's get people to check it out. That's a coalition to, what's the name of it again? Coalition to...
Disarm Florida Alliance.
Disarm Florida Alliance. Very important. So, thank you for being on the show, Possum. Any closing words?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, for hearing us out, and let's do whatever we can to bring down this empire.